G'day everyone. My name's Iccy Harrington, and yeah, I'm 48 years old. Finding it hard to remember that age. Live in Melbourne, and I've got two kids. Indy, who's a 13-year-old boy, and a new one, Louis, who's 20 months old, little boy as well. So they've been fun during lockdown.
Tell us, where did you grow up?
I was born in Melbourne, grew up in Upper Beaconsfield, up in the Dandenongs. Yeah, spent all my childhood out there. Mum and Dad still live there. Have lived in the city since I was about 20 years old. Yeah, and lived in various parts around the world here and then at different periods. But yeah, Melbourne boy. Yeah, so growing up in Upper Beaconsfield, it was pretty rural at the time, in the 70s. You know, it's about an hour from the city now, a bit less on a good run, and semi-rural now. It's a beautiful part of the world. It still feels like home now, you know. Love getting out there and spending time on Dad's place. Yeah, pretty blessed upbringing out there, because we were on about an acre there, and you know, had you know, a paddock at the back, and bushland around it, and you know, we had chickens and a horse and a cow and things like that, which are all good fun when you're a kid. You know, run around in the, there's that sort of stereotypical upbringing where, you know, you run out the door in the morning and you just come back for food, you know, and had great neighbours who were all the same sort of age, and you know, we used to knock around on BMXs and make cubby houses and run around in the bush, and you know, play British Bulldogs and things like that. And you know, went to primary school in Upper Beaconsfield Primary, which was, you know, about a kilometre away or something, walking distance, or ride a bike and things like that. And yeah, it was cool, free, you know, rural kind of lifestyle. Really enjoyed it, and ultimately I'd like to live that kind of lifestyle again at some stage, but for the moment and for the last, you know, couple of decades, have been tied to the city. You know, some of the advantages of living up, growing up like that is, yeah, like spent lots of time on push bikes and things. Got a little mini bike at an early age. That was before I did any motorsport of any sort. So I was on a little Yamaha GT80. And I made a circuit around the property, and I would like get home from school and just cut laps, lap after lap after lap, just drive everyone nuts, I think. And had plenty of prangs, and you know, but I think, you know, in terms of what we do now, and racing and driver training and all of that, that time on a motorbike at a young age was pretty crucial, because you know, your feel for a brake pedal it develops at a really young age. You know, if you jump on the front brake too quickly, you hit the ground real quick, you know. So you learn that finesse through, you know, riding mini bikes and things like that, and the younger the better. So yeah, that was probably the start of my going fast stage. Yeah. So then, yeah, lived in Melbourne most of my life, but yeah, I've travelled, been fortunate to travel a lot. I've spent quite a bit of time in Southeast Asia, quite a bit of time in Europe. I've lived in the Greek Isles for a summer, in the European Alps for a winter, working and playing. I lived in Cambodia for a couple of years in the early 2000s. That was a massive adventure. Did some cool things over there. And yeah, traveling's always been a big part of my life, something I'm pretty passionate about, and try to do it as much as possible. Still get out and about overseas as regularly as I can. Love to go skiing internationally whenever I can, so often to New Zealand or to Japan. Yeah, I think traveling is a very important part of life. Opens your eyes, and it's always adventurous. So
Back to car stuff. What was your first car?
my very first car,
Yeah.
it was a 1978 Mazda 323. You know, the rounded hatch. It was gold in colour. Me and my friends fondly named it the Gold Jelly Bean.
Yeah.
And yeah, back to where I grew up at the time, it was a lot of the roads out there were dirt, and you know, we've driven some of those roads, you and I, on some jag events, and they're bitumen now, and they're fantastic roads out around there. And you know, again, we probably honed a bit of the craft in the early days of driving on those roads, and but it was a lot of fun when the roads were gravel, and that car and I were frequently sideways traveling to and fro from Upper Beaconsfield to wherever I had to be. So yeah, fond memories actually of that little golden jelly bean.
Isn't that fantastic? Even a little car like that, you can still have fun in it, and you know, not even if you're getting it sideways or not, you can still really enjoy it.
I got my CAMS license in that car. So yeah, back then you could do I think it was an OLT type day through CAMS, or you could do a level 1 and level 2, or a level 2 and a high performance course through Murcott's at the time. Sure. And you could, so it was a day at Sandown, and it's actually, I remember the two guys who trained me on that day were Jeff B and Darren Porter, who I still work with these days through other driving organisations. And I rocked up there. I'd been racing karts at the time, and were looking to move into cars, and rocked up to the high performance and the track day in the Mazda 323 and fanged it around Sandown for the day. And it was not the fastest car. I mean, the top speed of that was probably about 110 k's an hour, like revving its tits off. And there were lots of people there in pretty flash cars. And at the end of the day, we did a mock race, and they put me down the back. I think it was based on, you know, a lap time or something like that. They worked it out. I'm not 100% sure, but and they started us on the back straight going up the hill, and they started us with the drop of the flag. And I saw it coming, and I just launched early. It went for the grass, 2 wheels up the grass. This, you know, simulated race is not meant to be competitive. It's meant to show that, you know, you can drive safely and quickly, reasonable pace, and that, you know, lines and flags. And but you know, the racer in us gets the better of us at times. And so I saw the flag about to drop, and I launched early and went to the grass, 2 wheels up the grass, because I knew that by the time we'd been up the front straight and the back straight twice, that everyone would have just powered past me again. So I was keen as to get as many people behind me by the time we got into Dandenong Road. So passed a bunch of people, 2 wheels on the grass, and then made a big dive up a whole lot more down into Dandenong Road. And after that, just went backwards. But that was a bit of fun for me in the Mazda 323.
That is fantastic. Who actually taught you to drive when you were on your L plates?
It would have been my mum and dad. Yeah, just time in the car with them. Didn't have any formal driving lessons, no.
And what about the racing? You mentioned that you did already have a bit of go-karting before you went and did that OLT. So tell us about how you got into racing and how old you were.
So my dad is an engineer, and he has always loved motor racing, been a big fan of it. For the engineering side of it, never had any interest in driving himself. actually hates being a passenger, never taken up the opportunity to be a passenger. And so it's spawned from him, I guess. And then we went on a family European vacation in 1977. Mum and Dad took the family, my sisters and I, around Europe for 6 months in a camper van. And we went to the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and we camped there for the weekend, and we climbed through the fence from the camping ground into the grandstand with no tickets or anything, and sat in amongst the Tifosi at the second chicane and watched the Italian Grand Prix in '77. You know, the six-wheeler Tyrrell and Lauda in his Ferrari, and I was just hooked from then on. I was the age of 5 then. I just wanted to race cars. I was a mad Ferrari fan from then on. And so then back in Australia, I used to stay up late at night and watch Grand Prix on Nine's Wide World of Sports with Dad. I've actually been watching some old Grand Prix during the lockdown from the 80s and stuff, and the coverage is funny. It's come a long way, the coverage, but it was so good back then. I love the cars of the era, the 70s and 80s. And so, yeah, that was my thing. I just wanted to race from a young age. I used to watch it every Grand Prix that I could. And like I said, had a mini bike to start with, and that developed that need for speed, and nagged Mum and Dad for years to get a go-kart. And eventually, after having to do chores and save some money and contribute and that sort of thing, and I had to go through the process of, you know, finding out what was involved and you know, how to get a license and become club members and all of that, and, you know, taking little recce trips with Dad down to Oakley Go-Kart Club and to watch meetings and see whether I was really interested. You know, they put me through my paces before they committed. And then we ended up getting a second-hand car, and we just started out slowly and found our feet. Dad,
How old were you then?
I was 14. So not the youngest starts, you know, you could start at 7 years old at the time. Bit behind a lot of the others, but still reasonably young. And yeah, so Dad and I, we started out just as a, you know, father and son team, and Dad was building my engines. He's always loved two-stroke engines for as long as I'd known. You know, as a kid, he'd always loved two-stroke model aeroplanes. So he knew about two-stroke engines, and with his engineering, he knew about engines. So he developed as an engine builder, and we went on to spend several years racing karts. During that time, we won a national title and a couple of state titles. So had a very successful time there, and they were great years, absolutely brilliant. Lots of fun racing. You know, everyone talks about how raw and cut and thrust go-kart racing is. But it's also a real community. You know, you're traveling a lot of the time with the same people, and you know, White Dog, who we worked together with, I've known him since I was 14 years old, from go-karting and through then Formula Ford and then through driver training. And, you know, there's a lot of friendships that I have in motorsport still today that were formed in those go-kart days. So, yeah, very important time, very enjoyable time. A lot of friends made, and a lot learned. You know, that's where you learn your racecraft and learn how to set things up, learn how to go quick. And so, yeah, we sort of had success there. It's very handy having your dad as your own engine builder. We got to do a lot of testing, and we, you know, then got support from some manufacturers, local manufacturers, for karting chassis and things like that. And then we decided that we wanted to move into cars. At the time, I was racing for Apache go-karts, which was owned by Dougal McDougall and his family. Karts were being manufactured in South Australia, and Dougal was selling them well around the country, but based out of Knox, Country Gully, Knox. And I was there working with them, and Dougal and I became really good friends, and we decided to buy a Formula Ford together. So we went halves in a car, which the car had good history. It was a 1989 Van Diemen, which was actually Russell Ingall's car. And then after Russell Ingall had bought it, had finished with it, Stephen White Dog, he ran it for a while. And then Dougal and myself, our families, we bought the car off the Whites, and we went halves each. The idea was just to get in there at low cost, share the expenses, share the driving, and we just competed initially at state rounds, and we'd go to a race meeting, and one of us had run the car in Formula Libre, which is an open wheeler category, so you're racing against slicks and wings. Formula 2's meant anything through to Formula 4s, Formula V's, whatever. And one of us had run in the Formula Ford category, and it was just, and then we'd alternate at different race meetings, and the idea was just to get miles under our belts and see if we were any good at it. And we did that for a year or so. That was 91, 92, over that period. And then Dougal decided to buy a new car. They bought Stephen Richards' Van Diemen 91, and we bought the 89 outright off them, their half. So, and then we carried on with the 89 for a little bit, for another season or so. Still just, getting the grips of it. Again, we were still just doing it all ourselves. Dad was learning to build a quick Formula Ford engine, which, so the whole time it was a proper father-son team, all of our racing, well, most of it, until the latter days. So yeah, through karting, he built all of my race engines, and he actually built an engine dyno for the go-kart engines at the time, which was probably one of the first ever in the country. I think I've shown you that, haven't I?
Yeah.
And
it's a fantastic little garage still.
Yeah, so
is that Ford in the garage now? Is that the same one you're talking about?
No. So we had a couple over the years. So started in the 89, and then we bought a 93 Van Diemen after we bought that from Steve Ellery. He'd run it as a new car in 93. We bought that for the 94 season. And then from that, I ran that car in 93, 94 and 95. 95 was the first full season that we did at national championship level. And then in 96, we went for, the big tilt at the championship and bought a new car, had the 96 Van Diemen, and had a big crack at the season then. With mixed fortunes, finished 5th in the championship, which wasn't what I was hoping for. But and that's the car that you saw in the shed we still have, and we held on to that car, and it sat there dormant for a long time until about 2010, and so yeah, after running 96, I sort of moved on from Formula Ford, but didn't have budgets, and picked up what I could here and there, and had a little bit of money. 97, I sort of was trying to get into Formula Holden. I got to test quite a few, got to test various other cars, Auscars and NASCARs and things like that. And got to do one, the Australian Grand Prix in a Formula Holden. But that was just a one-off event.
Was that
and then 98.
Melbourne, not Adelaide? That was already in Melbourne Grand Prix.
Yeah. So that was very cool. And then out of sort of desperation, went back to Formula Ford again in 98. The McDougalls, they had then brought Magale into the country, the French manufactured car, and they offered me a subsidised ride in the Magale there, which, yeah, the car wasn't great, and we just struggled all season, which was really the end of my sort of career as a, trying to pursue a professional career. I just sort of realised that I'd been banging my head against the wall for quite a few years, trying to find budgets, and had sponsors to race at A level, but never enough to move on and keep progressing. And saw a lot of people with big checkbooks just surpass me, and it was demoralising. We proved that we could do well on limited resources, but it knew that to take the next step we needed more, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't, my sponsors couldn't contribute more, and I couldn't get the big sponsor that I needed. And so, yeah, that was the end of 98. I turned my back on it and packed my bags and went traveling, went backpacking around Asia and Europe for a few years, and did a lot of traveling, which was awesome. It was so cool. And I don't regret any of that. I obviously, didn't achieve my dreams in terms of where I would like to have gone in motorsport. But I look back at it now and think of all the things that I got to do that I wouldn't have done if I stayed here racing cars. And I remember a really poignant moment. I'd come back from, so I'd been around Asia and traveling and Europe for a couple of years, and then I came back to Australia for a little bit. I spent time in the ski fields here, and then went to Cambodia for a couple of years. And after a couple of years there, I came back here and I had nothing going on, and I was working in a cafe in Melbourne, just serving coffees. And one day, Steve Richards, who I'd raced against and knew quite well in the early days in Formula Ford and in go-karting, and him and I think it was Ingle and Jan Magnussen all came into this cafe, and they sat down for a meal, and I was like, shit, I was all embarrassed, and I was like, I can't go and serve them, like I had too much pride, sort of thing. And then I saw them there, and I think Richard caught my eye or something, and I thought, oh, fuck it, I'm going to say hello. I know Richard well. And he said to me, like, Ick, where have you been, And during this time while I'd been away, he'd won a Bathurst, I sort of told him a little bit about what I'd done and where I'd been. And he was so humble. He was like, mate, I wondered what had happened to you. You just sort of disappeared. And I said, yeah. I said, congratulations on your Bathurst win, man. That's sensational. It's so good to hear. And he said, yeah, well, like I've just been running around the same racetracks that we've been running around for years, and you've been off doing all these adventures around the world. And it was very humbling, and put things into perspective a little bit, and made me feel a lot better about the place that I was at. It's all cool experiences, and I've had amazing times racing cars, and I feel very privileged to have had the opportunities to have raced, and great experiences, great competition, highs and lows, which sort of shape you. a lot of hard work, and but then on the flip side, have had the opportunities to go and travel and see the world and broaden my horizons, and put a little bit back, I guess, you know, in the work that I did in Cambodia. I saw a lot of poverty there when I traveled there the first time, and realized how privileged that I had been with all the motor racing, and when I saw, you know, kids living on the street and begging and rubbish, and, you know, just, it was a world that I'd only ever seen on TV and was not real to me. And when I saw it firsthand, it was like, shit, it made a big impact to me. And that's why a couple of years later, went back and worked there and got involved in charities there, and did some cool stuff there. And it, you know, brought a balance to my life.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah. That's only touching the surface. How many hours have we got?
Moving towards the driver training side of things, and just a quick description on how you ended up getting into driver training and some of the experience you've had over the many years of driver training.
Yeah, so I actually first got involved in driver training back in '93. And it was while I was starting, you know, getting a bit more serious in Formula Ford. I had a part-time job at Vic Roads in South Oakley down here, and working in license and registration. And by chance, one day, Rowan Harmon came in, and Rowan, who is category manager of the Touring Car Masters these days, he came in with a couple of HQ Holdens with sign writing all over them, cages on them and stuff. And just by chance, he came to my counter that day, and I had to road register these cars. And so we go out to look at the cars, and had to look at, you know, VIN numbers and compliance plates and all that jazz. And we got chatting, and you know, the cars had track time on them and stuff, and we just got chatting, and told him what I was doing, and he told me what the cars were for, and they were track cars, you know, much the same as V8 races today. And people could come along and drive themselves with an instructor in the passenger seat. And Rowan asked me if I wanted to go down to Sandown one day and have a look at what they do, and I did that. And back then there was no sort of train. Not that you're one of the few. Evolve is one of the few companies that do actually give a bit of training to their instructors. And back then it was just, oh, you can have a go now. Jump in the passenger seat and coach this guy. And it was like, shit, okay. I don't know what to do, but and Rowan's like, you know, just talk about braking points and apexes and lines, and, you know, throttle inputs and braking technique, and, you know, you'll be right. How to hold the steering wheel, vision, all the fundamentals, and so winged it, and that's where it started. So '93. So it's a long career in driver training. I did that for a while, and worked with Drive Safe Australia through Rowan Harmon, and then got some work with HSV through John Harvey. That was the first sort of manufacturer work that I did with him, which was, yeah, just sort of opened all the doors, and it's just ticked away ever since. Which is, I remember one of my first HSV days, we went to Adelaide International, and I was really new at it still, and we were driving over there with Rowan and John and myself, and we were in one of the new HSVs, and it was when they released I don't know what model Commodore it was, but you might know, but it was 185 kilowatt HSV Commodore. And everyone was drooling, you know. It was like 185 kilowatts, you know. You know, and by these terms, it's absolutely nothing. And but everyone was in awe of these cars, and we went over to AIR, and we were like, we did some, braking exercises and then some laps and things like that. And I had, John Harvey had set me up doing a braking exercise, and we had to groups, and we had, people revolving around and waving them down and whistling them through braking exercise and then giving them a few tips. And I just had cars going everywhere. and John at one stage came and saw the chaos that I was in and stopped and, assisted me for running my little exercise for the rest of the day. And it was a baptism of fire, let's say. Became good friends with him and ended up doing a lot of work with HSV and in the early days. And then, so, from then driver training has been sort of the backbone of my income for ever since, really. There have been periods when I haven't done it, when I've gone away and traveled, but I've always been able to just come back and pick up the phone and say to whoever, I'm in town, and is there any work going? And people say, yeah, sure. We could use your skills, come along. And whether it be defensive driving or on track, there's been periods where a lot of the work was more defensive driving orientated, road safety stuff, which I do less of these days. These days it's more track work and manufacturer type work, which is, I've enjoyed that evolution through. I really enjoy the style of work that we do now. So I work for probably a dozen different people who I work for at different points in time. Some people it will be, a day or two a year. Some people like Evolve, and some manufacturers are the core work for me. And we do, lots of work with those regular groups. But it's fun. It's, we do a lot of traveling and work with great people. There's a lot of camaraderie in amongst the group. We all talk the same language, and we all, have the same similar histories. We all understand each other's backgrounds and passions, and, there's a lot of piss taking, which is fun. But we're all, we're all serious about what we do on track. And I think it's important to have that group of people who, you can rely on, that can cover each other and got your back when you need it, and which builds that camaraderie, and all enjoy a beer and a few storytelling sessions at the end of the day as well. So it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of what we're about. And when I look at developing my team, it certainly revolves around those principles of getting the right people, getting the people that have got the understanding of what it's all about, with the ability to enjoy each other's company and have a bit of fun with each other, but also know that when it's time to do the job, the serious stuff needs to happen. And I think that reflects in what we offer at the end of the day. But it works on both sides. The customers get a benefit out of that because they're getting the best instruction, but also we're enjoying our work environment too. And if you didn't enjoy what we do, you can't turn up and just sit next to someone at 200 k's an hour. You've got to be in much. You got to enjoy it. Yeah, otherwise you're just gonna end up in a crash or something, and no one wants that.
That's an interesting point. There's a lot of people who I know in motorsport who say that they just wouldn't do what we do. I think it's a bit nuts. They're not comfortable in the passenger seat. And sure, there are times when I'm not 100% comfortable in the passenger seat, but I guess having done it for a long time, you develop the skills to be able to do it. And the big skill is being ahead of the game, isn't it? But we get to play with some awesome cars as well. Before I was talking about the drooling over 185 kilowatt HSVs. Now we drool over 700 horsepower Ferraris and things like that. So, it has its rewards.
Yeah, definitely. And the people we meet are great too. And on that, meeting the people, have you coached anyone famous? Have you had the opportunity of having someone next to you who's a bit of a celebrity of some sort?
Yeah, quite a few occasions. Yeah, the first times were I did the celebrity driver training for the '95 Australian Grand Prix, and that was pretty fun. I was racing at the same time, Formula Ford at that Grand Prix, and so I was juggling driver training and racing. And to be honest, I was young and a bit starstruck by some of the celebrities, and it was a big distraction to my racing, and I had a shit weekend racing. Yeah, it was no good. I crashed a couple of times, and my mind was elsewhere. But yeah, there was some good and bad people to work with on that particular event. Some who, it was interesting, the sports people. So we had some sports people. There was Kirsty Marshall, the world champion freestyle skier. John Bertrand was on it. There were a couple of footy players. And then there was some media people. Sam Newman was one of them. These are people that stuck out in my mind for good and for bad. But people like Kirsty and John Bertrand, they were fantastic to train. Like, you know, they were just, a lot of boatsmen seem to be good drivers, I've found over the year. And they take it on, what you teach them, and they apply it, and they just have the feeling, you know. I don't know why it is, but they just get it. But the thing about them also was those two that I mentioned, is they just wanted more. They wanted to know more. They wanted extra tuition, and they were competitive by nature, and they wanted to be good, and they wanted to unlock the keys to it, you know. But then there were some of the celebrity people who were far less impressive in many respects. Egos were bad, and just poor attitudes. Yeah, so that was some of them. I'm trying to think of others as I chat. I did have the chance to work one-on-one with Cadell Evans back in the day, and so he was looking at getting into racing, and I spent 2 days, I think, with him, one at Sandown and one at Calder Park, in his little Lotus Elise. And he was similar to the nature of person that I was just talking about. Very motivated, accomplished sports person, just wanted to be really good at it, loved his motor racing, and wanted to understand it and know how to do it well, and just hung on every word you said, and then would apply it. And again, had the feel for it. You know, I've heard it said in the past, you know, as driver trainers, we can teach you technique all day long, but if you don't have the feeling, it's very hard to progress. Like, we can teach technique, but we can't teach feel, you know. And some people have got it, some people haven't. I guess a degree of it can be learned, but it's a real pleasure, our job, when you get into the passenger seat with someone and they just have the feel for the car, and it just clicks with them, and they have this presence of mind to be able to process what you're saying, and they can apply it. And yeah, some of these sports people, I guess it's through their experiences of being coached, taking on information, self-assessing, and then applying what they're being told, makes them fantastic to work with.
What's a funny story, a big driving fail sort of story that you've been a part of?
I'm trying to, rummage through the files in my mind as we're talking. Wow, there's so many, mate. I was just thinking of that 95 Adelaide Grand Prix and the coaching the celebrities there. And we had Tracy Dale. This is just a big put your foot in it moment. And Tracy Dale was there and she was driving.
Was she like a newsreader or something? Is it?
Yeah, that type of celeb. And at the Grand Prix, because we had a full week of coaching beforehand, and then at the Grand Prix, her husband, Alan Dale, from Neighbours and movies and things, I've forgotten his character. Anyway, he went on to movies and things, but and he was a fair bit older than her, and they came. We at the Grand Prix, he was there, and Tracy came and introduced him to me, and I was like, oh, so this is your dad, Tracy? It wasn't his dad. It wasn't her dad. That was a pretty embarrassing moment. I think it was Jim, wasn't it? He was that character Jim on Neighbours.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, other moments. I did have on a driving course one day a dude arrive on a motorbike to do the car driving course. That was interesting. He had to go home with his tail between his legs. Yeah, one of my more stupid moments in a race car. It was when I was testing Formula Holden for the first time, and in the Formula Ford, I used to always just, if it was at the end of the day and you got to load it into the trailer, there's no wing on the front of the Formula Ford, so I'd always just drive up to the trailer and drive the front wheels up onto the ramps, sort of half load it, less pushing, being a bit proactive, And the first test day in Formula Holden, I tried to do the same thing with a wing on the front of it. And sure enough, it just crunched the wing. I just forgot that there was a wing there completely. You couldn't see the wing sitting in the driver's seat. And I just did that same move out of habit, I guess, and rolled the wheels onto the ramps and crunch, damaged the front wing of the Formula Holden. So that didn't go down very well with my new team. Yeah, fortunately, it wasn't too bad. It was more my ego that was damaged.
You do a few other things off track, and also during this time while we're in COVID and stuff, do you have a sim that you use?
Yeah, so these days I dovetail a few different things for my income, driver training, and I also I'm a graphic designer, and I have my own little super slick design business, which is on the quiet side these days because of the demands that I have in motoring, more predominant than the graphic design, but that fills the gaps at times. But the other main thing that I do, I'm heavily involved in Formula Ford again. Over the past 5 years now, about 6 years ago now, I'd made a bit of a comeback in 2010 and started racing the old 96 car that we had. We did a few hill climbs and then went state racing again. And that sort of reintroduced me to the Formula Ford fraternity. And someone from the Formula Ford Association asked me if I was interested in doing a bit of commentary. And I commentated a little bit. That was a bit of fun. And then they asked me if I was interested in being the DSO for the Driving Standards Observer for the Australian Championship, which I did. I did that for 4 years, and then that moved into the opportunity to become category manager for the Australian Formula Ford Championship. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years. This would have been the third year, but we haven't turned a wheel this year because of COVID, obviously. So yeah, that's been a really exciting and challenging new role for me, learning a whole lot of new stuff, sort of on the other side of the fence for of motorsport. You know, I've had to learn about the judicial process and the actual running of a category as opposed to being a competitor as such. So a lot of new challenges, but actually really cool being involved at that level. It's really nice, again, to go full circle in a category that I spent a lot of time racing in and that I've always loved so much, to now be employed in this role, and see the young stars coming up and, you know, be a part of their careers and then watch them move on and go on to other stuff. It's a challenging but really fulfilling role. And so, but this year with coronavirus, it has come with a whole other set of challenges as well. So much as you, Dean, would have experienced throughout this year, normally we would be racing at this time of year. We have a 7-round championship, and prior to the season, you have events put in place. You know where you're going to be at certain times of the year, and you just work towards those events. But this year, it's because we haven't been able to run events. It's been a constant case of talking and planning events, and then having them delayed or postponed, and then rescheduling and replanning. And it's been frustrating and pretty arduous, and lots of conversations and no action. And so this year, early on, it was, you know, lots of positive chats. You know, during the first lockdown, it was like, yeah, you know, we'll get racing at some stage, and in the second half of the year, we'll have a championship, and it won't be the championship that we started out with, but we'll get as many rounds in as we can. But it's been it's in constant flux and changing and evolving the whole time. So, and so on one side, we're talking to promoters and tracks to put events on. On the other side, you're talking to competitors and you know, keeping them informed and so they can plan and know what's happening. It's been really challenging. But so one of the things that became apparent that we could do early on in the first lockdown was this e-racing, which I don't have a sim, and I've played a few games in the past. Few racing games. I've never been any good at it. I've never spent enough time at it to craft the skills. It's a different set of skills. There's obviously some crossover stuff, but you don't have the feel. And I've always, whenever I've played online gaming, I just overdrive and crash too much. So, and I've never devoted the time to get good at it. But when, you know, during our first lockdown, it became very apparent that, you know, a lot of the big categories from Formula One right through the ranks were all going e-racing, sim racing. Not that it was my bag and I didn't know anything about it. I was like, hang on, I probably need to be aware of what this is all about, because it could potentially be something that we need to embrace during this lockdown, and could fill the void for our competitors and be a means to keep in contact with our community and followers while we're not actually racing. So I remember I thought I'd better watch the V8s, their first round, and sat down and watched it and was blown away by the show that they put on. You know, it was like a real live race broadcast with the commentary team sitting there. The only difference was that they were commentating a game as opposed to real life racing, and just saw the potential for that to be used in Formula Ford for various reasons. Like I said, to just keep everybody in contact, give our competitors a media to keep themselves in the public eye, promote themselves, their sponsors, us to keep in contact with our fraternity, and, you know, for us to use it as a means to let people know what was going on. Because I behind the scenes, I was just getting phone calls every day and having the same conversations about where we were at in the championship. And this was a way of sort of being able to keep that information flowing in another forum. And so we had a foray into e-racing, and we called it the Australian Formula Ford E-Challenge. We had a 5-round championship. Like I said, I knew nothing about e-racing and broadcasting it and that sort of thing. And so in the period of 3 or 4 weeks, I had to suss it all out, and was put in contact with Lucas from Luke Esports, who does the broadcasting. He was instrumental in it, and he was fantastic in broadcasting it for us, streaming it for us, and commentating and teaching me what I needed to know about it. And Cody Bircher, one of our front runners in the Australian Championship, he's a big gamer. He also was instrumental in it. He hosted the league in iRacing and did that administration end of the hosting the league, and also teaching me what I needed to know. And so then I had to put everyone together and get competitors together. So put it out there to see who wanted to be involved. So first and foremost, we put it out there to our Formula Ford Association members to get them involved, our national championship competitors. Then it was, we wanted the rest of the grid slots to be filled with historic and state competitors. And then if there were positions left on the grid, anyone that wanted to be involved, really. And the first round, I had over 70 people interested in it. And I think the track density was limited to 40 something or 50 maybe. I can't remember now. So there were quite a few people that we had to turn away. But yeah, it was awesome. We, the popularity of it, the support was huge. And we had people from the UK, the States, New Zealand, and a lot of people from around the country competing, all races, all drivers. That was one of our things. We wanted to keep it to a driver, like a real life driver base, rather than a sim gamer base competition. Which now I look back, it would be interesting to do it with gamers involved now, and something may do again in the future and invite gamers into it. But when we did the E-Challenge, it was a Formula Ford promotion. So, we had to keep in mind the whole time we were doing it, what the purpose of it was. And it was about Formula Ford, the category, the Formula Ford community, the Formula Ford, the national championship competitors. So they had to be the priority. So we had 5 rounds, which, by the end of it, I think it was getting a bit long in the tooth for everyone. We had, initially we had a few supercar drivers and things involved, and, ex-Formula Ford champions, that type of thing, and which were big draw cards. But I think a lot of people got saturated with sim racing to the point that, the last couple of rounds, they were starting to get over it, and a few people were selling their sims and stuff like that. And Nick Percat was a big supporter and raced at a couple of events and did a little bit of commentary and things like that. But come the last round, when I spoke to him, he said, "Dude, I've sold my sim. I can't do it. Sorry." It reached saturation point, and people just really were eager to get out there and drive real cars again. So
yeah,
it filled a void, and it was really good, and for that purpose. But I've got quite a few ideas of how we could go forward with this as something to do during the off season, and engage our competitors and potential new competitors.
In that series, was that the one that Jake Foraker and Steve Cordis were running in as well?
Yeah, two of the guys who in our driver training fraternity, well, three of them actually, who we've worked with a lot, who were also regular competitors in our E-Challenge, were Steve White Dog, and Jake Foraker and Steve Cordis. So they all ran it every round of the championship, and it was great to have them on board. They're all ex-Formula Forders, and they were all keen and competitive, so it was awesome. And that was actually a cool side to that, in that it became a little social thing for us, you know, like it. I know, like White Dog, he would spend a lot of time on his own during, and still is during lockdown, and the gaming, the sim racing has been a social outlet for us, you know. So me, not so much, but for those guys, it definitely was.
What sort of other things fill your time when you're not on track and you're not looking after Formula Ford?
Well, you know, mate, my big buzz these days is skateboarding. I've become a bit obsessed with skateboarding, and you can understand why. It's an awesome sport. I mean, yeah, my oldest son got me involved in it a couple of years ago, and then he stopped, and I got the bug, and I use it for, well, fun and enjoyment, but also keeping fit as well, when I'm not breaking my bones and things like that. But because I have had a couple of nasty injuries doing it, but it's such an awesome sport, and I find one of the things about skateboarding that I really like is the contrast to motorsport, where motorsport is a very, very privileged arena where it takes a lot of money to do it, you know, even in its most basic forms. And so it's exclusive to a lot of people, where a skateboard costs very little money, and it's like the game of soccer or football, you know. You can get the equipment to do it very easily, and you can go and find someone to have a kick with. So it's skateboarding, it's, you know, you get a full setup for, you know, the best equipment for a couple $100, and it doesn't cost anything to go to a park, and you can go there whenever you want, and there's no equipment envy, there's no excuses about lack of horsepower or no testing or anything like that. It's, if you can't do a trick, there's only one person to blame, mate. You know it. It's the person riding the board. So I love that aspect of it. And for me, it's just cool learning a new sport, you know. It fills my need for adrenaline, and it's highly skillful. I find it much, much harder than driving a car at speed. I have the utmost respect for these guys who look like bums down the park who ride skateboards. They're athletes, mate. Their skill level is so high. I know you can appreciate this because you're a great skateboarder yourself, but it goes unnoticed. The skills that these kids that have at the average, you know, your local skate park is incredible, and it goes unnoticed. But yeah, so that's my latest obsession, I guess. Yeah, I just love fitness. I do a lot of running. So the biggest upset during the first lockdown for me was because the first couple of weeks skate parks were open, and so I couldn't work, but I'd just go to the skate park and skate for a couple of hours every day. Lockdown got really hard for me when they closed the skate parks. Then I turned my hand to, you know, my attention to other fitnesses. So I run a lot. And I just do little home exercise workouts, push-ups, sit-ups, that sort of thing. So yeah, been keeping pretty fit that way. The other real passion that I have is snow skiing. I'm mad for it. Like, I guess motor racing has just been my passion my whole life, but it's not always fun. There have been aspects to it where there's a lot of pressure. It's hard work. You know, I've always been hands-on on preparing the cars myself and that side of it. So late nights, hard work, and whereas snow skiing for me is just, I find it adventurous. You're out there in the mountains. I love the mountains, the atmosphere up in the snow. It's an adrenaline buzz, you know, going fast, hitting, getting big air and stuff. It's just, I love it, and I love the freedom of it. It's really physical, and I love traveling with it. So, like I said earlier, I get to Japan a few times, you know, when I can, and I have been a few times, and New Zealand. I've worked in Austria for a season. I've worked up at Falls Creek for a couple of seasons here as a ski instructor. So it's my sport where I think I just have the utmost fun. I love it.
And that's it, the freedom. I think you mentioned that word in there, and it really is. There's that freedom, and then with the skateboarding, there's that new challenge, and especially for yourself coming to skateboarding at a later age, it's such a different thing for your body to do the maneuvers that you have to do on a skateboard. And there's no rules. You can do it in a bowl, you can do it on the street, you can do it on a ramp, you can do it in so many different ways, and there's no one saying you have to do this or you have to achieve this. Or what about, you mentioned overseas a fair bit, you've done a lot of stuff overseas, but did you ever race or drive a coach overseas, or was it only ever just travel for your own sort of enjoyment and lifestyle and that sort of stuff?
Interestingly, the only ever international racing I've done has been go-kart racing in Cambodia. There's an idea for you, hey? So yeah, that's how I made my money in Cambodia. So I didn't know there was any form of racing over there. And at the time, my partner and I, we just wanted to go there and see if we could do something of some worth, you know, give a little back. And we lobbed up there without work or anything like that. And I saw advertised a local go-kart hire place in the local paper in, I don't know, the first week or so that I was there, and I was starting to look for work. And it was a French guy that owned it, and he owned a local insurance company. And I contacted him, and he invited me to go and meet him, and we had a drink, and I told him my background, and he said, do you want to run events at my go-kart track? And I was like, sweet, it sounds cool. So we ran monthly team events in the hire carts, but part of my deal as well, so I got paid for that, but part of my deal also was I got to compete in the Cambodian Championship, which I had no idea existed, but they had serious race cars. They were running 125cc Leopard engines, which are quick and in current model go-karts and things. And so there was this expat fraternity that lived in Phnom Penh, which raced once a month, and throughout the course of the year they had a national championship there. So my role was to partly organise that. I got to race myself, although I broke ribs in the early days and didn't get to compete a lot. The track was rough and I was well out of condition. But also I got to coach a couple of young Cambodian drivers, because we had, my boss and I, we formed this big idea of trying to, you know, get some young Cambodian kids and give them a chance and see whether we could turn them into race car drivers, and that was harder than we anticipated. But really fun and rewarding, and we didn't get to go as far with that, with coaching these kids as we had hoped. But it gave a couple of kids, well, you know, I mean, we had goals that were up here and we ended up achieving here. But if nothing else, a handful of kids who would never have had the opportunity to race a go-kart got to race some serious go-karts, you know, so that was very cool. And I also then, we had another grand idea and we decided to put on a street event in the streets of Phnom Penh, an Asian Monaco, if you like, which I look back at this and I just think this was absolutely crazy, taking on these ideas. But this French boss of mine, he was an ideas guy, and he had the resources to back me and do things, and he was, you know, behind me the whole time doing it. And so we put on this go-kart event in the streets of Phnom Penh. And if you've ever been there, or you know what Asian cities are like, they're chaotic, and we had to shut down an area of town, and we had to repave some streets. We had to work with the municipalities, the different councils, and immigration, because we invited competitors from all the neighbouring countries. I think we had people from 11 different countries come and compete in the end. But logistically, over there, being a very corrupt country, it's easy to get things done in that you can just make things happen. But it's, in some ways, there are lots of challenges in making it happen as well, because they're just not, they operate in a different way to us. So there were lots of challenges, but it happened, and it was cool in the end. It was, you know, we had lots of competitors, and no one died, although there were moments when I thought they might. There was one stage during the race where a homeless lady just jumped over the tyre barriers with a baby in her arms, with a cart coming towards her at 100 k's an hour. And this was the kind of challenges which you don't foresee, you know, here, just, you know, different understanding of things. These people have never seen motorsport before, let alone on their doorstep, had no appreciation of the danger of these carts flying at them, the approach speeds and that sort of thing. And they just started wandering across the track and stuff. And so we had a PA system running the whole circuit. And I had a local TV presenter to do some commentary. But I stipulated with them that you have to keep, you know, drumming into the spectators not to cross the barriers, you know, that it's dangerous and be careful. But it didn't happen. And in the end, I was trying to run this event, and I was getting on the mic and in my bad command, trying to tell the public to not cross the track and stuff. It was just, oh no, it was diabolical. But yeah, we got through. But then what I was leading to through putting on that event, at the time, the Indian government put on a car rally that they wanted to travel all around all the Asian countries by road, which is sort of thought to be pretty challenging. Like a lot of the countries, like in Cambodia for one, but also Myanmar and Laos, and that, there's a lot of sort of inhospitable country and roads that aren't always, you know, car worthy, and river crossings and things like that. But the Indian government had this grand idea of putting on this an Indian Asian car rally, and they invited every country of the Asian community, which is 11 or 12 countries, to enter up to 4 cars, and you have a team of a minimum of 2 drivers in each car, and it was a 21-day journey around every one of these countries. And the idea was to promote tourism and trade by road through these countries, and to prove that you could drive through every one of these countries by road. And so and then each country had to put together their own teams and had to manage the travel and logistics of their teams, their drivers. And then in country, the officials would have to, put together the logistics of where they travelled, and where they'd stay, and the ceremonies in the cities and things like that. And there was a lot of pomp and ceremony and cultural events attached to it all. But the Cambodian authorities had no idea of a motorsport event. So they were like, who is this crazy foreigner that put on this go-kart race in Phnom Penh? Somebody contact him, somebody get him involved in this rally for us. So they came to me and asked if I could put together the Cambodian teams. And I said, yeah, I'll do it for some money, an amount which we negotiated, and I ended up getting ripped off over, like in true corrupt style. But one of the aspects of my role in it was that I got to compete in it. It wasn't a competition, it was a touring rally, so it was an endurance event. The whole point was just to get to the end. And the Indian government funded it all. They provided all the cars. So we're in SUVs, Tatas and Mirandas, and and so I had to get together the drivers, the Cambodian drivers. And so all I knew was these couple of go-karters that I'd trained. So I got them involved, and they were young. And there were a couple of other people who I knew had a bit of motoring experience, some expats who had lived abroad and stuff like that. But they couldn't do it and things like that. So I ended up getting some local taxi drivers to form the rest of the Cambodian team. And so it was, and in my car with me, I got an English guy who I knew through go-kart racing, who was a good driver, because I just wanted to have someone I knew I could rely on in my car, and we could speak English to each other as well. Because 21 days, and it was, up to 14 hours a day driving, so it was an endurance event. But it was so awesome. We flew to the foothills of the northern part of India, where it started, which it was a huge event. There were thousands of people in the street to watch us drive off, and drums and fireworks and elephants and just massive fanfare. And every town you drove to, the streets would be lined with people. It was huge. And and then through like the countries like Myanmar, that's sketchy, driving through the Golden Triangle. At the time, it was in massive civil war. We had like military helicopters flying ahead to clear the roads, and we were under military guard with, armored vehicles with cannons on top and stuff like that. And it was sketchy, but we got to do it. It was a massive adventure. And then when we drove through India, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, then into Cambodia. Our days in Cambodia, we were local heroes. The Cambodian cars, we had 4 cars, and we were like heroes. And even though I was a white guy, it was like I was this Cambodian celebrity for a couple of days there. it was insane. And then we ended up back in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and ended up on an island in Indonesia. It was a very cool experience
That sounds amazing.
came about from. Sorry?
That sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was a challenge. It was hard work, and my role just managing my Cambodian team of taxi drivers. None of them had ever left the country before. So my role, I had to get passports for them, get visas for all the different countries we traveled through, and then make sure they got on planes to get to the different countries and didn't wander off of an evening and get lost in the town we were in or whatever it was. It was an epic adventure, but one that will stick with me for the rest of my life, that's for sure.
For sure. That's so cool. Have you got any favourite books or movies?
I just watched The Hunt for the Wilder People the other day. Do you know that one? Yeah. I watched that and I just thought, this is going to be one of my favourite movies. It's so cool. Little Ricky, he's such a funny character, and I don't know, there's something very innocent and fun and about them, their relationship. But I love all the Star Wars videos, movies. I'm mad for them. I've watched them over and over again, and with my sons, and look forward to introducing my youngest son to them as well. One of my favourite books would be Vernon God Little, which is may not have heard of it, but it's a good book to read. Set in America, kid who gets himself into trouble, sort of born on the wrong side of the tracks, and just it's funny. And yeah, actually one of my very favourite books, and I'll give my mate who the author is a plug. I'll give him a plug. Jeremy Massey, The Last 4 Days of Paddy Buckley. Everyone should read it. It is a brilliant book. Yeah, a very good friend of mine wrote it. It hooks you in from the first page, and it's based on the story of an Irish undertaker who gets mixed up through mixed up with the wrong people, and the adventures and troubles, trials and tribulations that he has to go through in surviving. And yeah, just an awesome story. So I'll give that one a read.
And we are there at the last question, and that is, this whole discussion has been quite motivational, but do you have a particular motivational statement that you'd like to sort of draw upon?
I never have, no. Shit. I wish I could come up with something. Keep evolving yourself.
Fantastic way to finish, mate. Well done. It's been an amazing chat. I've had such a good time, and to know that as well as I know you and stuff, there's still quite a lot of little stories in there that were new to me, and certainly the ones that weren't new to me are still also quite enjoyable for others to hear, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with everyone. And
yeah, just in the question of books and movies and things that you're asking about, I've recently been watching that series of Ando, the comedian who does the paintings now. He interviews someone and paints them.
Yep.
I really enjoyed it. I love his style of art, and but he conducts a really cool interview at the same time, and a lot of them are pretty emotional, Yeah. So I'm just wondering whether, though, that at the end of this interview, do we get a painting from you? I can't see it. Hold it back.
Wait, I know.
Move it back a little bit. There it is. Oh, yeah. Oh, mate, that
Look at
makes me
that
so
wavy hair.
emotional. I'm going to cry.
Look at that hair.
Yeah.
That's totally you.
You nailed it, mate. You've got a new career lined up here. Look
That
out, Undo.
is the best drawing I've ever done. So inspired by you, Iccy.
I've got two kids, Indy, who's a 13-year-old boy, and a new one, Louis, who's 20 months old, little boy as well. So they've been fun during lockdown. It's, you know, there are a lot of negatives to this period, but I guess having the little one, Louis, around has been a benefit because I get to spend lots of time with him, and it's actually been a cool phase for him to have his parents around all the time, and you know, getting that lots of one-on-one attention. So, you know, silver lining.
That's cool. How is Louis going, man?
He's a cool little kid. He's heaps of fun, and yeah, he's good entertainment. He's pretty easy. He's walking heaps. He's picking up new words all the time now. His latest word is truck. So you can imagine how that comes out a lot of the time. Particularly at inappropriate moments, he spots a truck. Probably my biggest crash ever was up at Bathurst in '95 in the Formula Ford, and this was a scary moment, and but there's sort of a funny side to it in hindsight. We were running sort of, I don't know, somewhere in the top 10, huge field up there, and there was a Congo line of maybe half a dozen cars or something, and Mark Noski was in the lead of this group, and we came over Skyline, and he spun at the front of this group. We're all nose to tail, and he just spun going over there, and cars just went left, right, and everywhere. And there used to be a gravel trap there, which is now bitumen. You can run straight through it. And I went straight ahead and through the gravel trap and kept it pinned and came out the other side of the gravel trap in front of everyone. So I'd gone from about 6th to 2nd or something. I don't know what, but it was, I thought, you know, this is a great move. So I just kept it flat as I went through the gravel trap. But my pedal box got full of stones and jammed my throttle open. So then we're coming to the dipper, and I've got full throttle, and I couldn't stop the thing. Like, I'd put brakes on, but we still had drive and you know, momentum going down a hill, and I just like ran into the wall. Skateboarding terminology, ran up, did a rail slide along the wall, so that screwed the two left-hand corners of the car, and then the car dropped back down and screwed the two right-hand corners, and the car ended up like belly up with all the corners like up in the air and wheels up in the air. It was a sad-looking car, but afterwards, my dad wasn't happy with me. He perhaps didn't understand the scenario of how it unfolded. He just was emotional with the disappointment of what had happened. And at the time, our pit crew was me, my dad, and my best mate Rooney, and we had to drive home. And we had a F350 we were borrowed at the time to tow our trailer around with a big bench seat. And we're driving home from Bathurst that night with the wrecked car in the back, and Dad well and truly pissed off with me. And so Dad was driving, and I was on the far left-hand side, and my mate in the middle. And we'd keep having a crack at each other. Like, there'd be periods of silence, and then he'd have a go at me, and I'd defend myself, and we'd have an argument, and my mate's sitting in the middle, you know, cowering away. And he said he spent most of that journey home doing his times tables in his head as we were like going at each other across the front of him.
Just to distract himself.
Yeah. That was not a very nice story, actually, but a big crash that I vividly remember.